Shalom Chaverim, and welcome to our Monday night live stream with Jews for Jesus, Germany. My name is Aaron Levine, and I have the privilege of leading our work of Jews for Jesus here in Berlin, Germany. I'm coming to you live from Berlin, so welcome. It's rare that we do live streams in English. Usually on Monday nights, we're doing live streams in German, answering your questions about whatever you want. Usually people write in or they write in live. So we're going to be doing that today, but it's going to be a little bit of a twist because we're doing it in English, and we have a very special guest who I will introduce to you in just a few moments, who is joining us tonight, who will be also able to take your questions about whatever topic you want, as long as you keep it kosher, let's say. So, for those of you who are new to our channel, who are tuning in for whatever reason, maybe you got the link from a friend or whatever, or maybe you just clicked on this video because of, who knows, you're interested. If you've never heard of Jews for Jesus before, the concept is very simple. We are Jews who believe in Jesus. We are Jewish people coming from a Jewish background, Jewish families, but we believe that Jesus is the long awaited Jewish Messiah. He's changed our lives, turned our lives upside down in a good way. And we want to share this amazing experience with you and with everyone else who's out there, who's listening and watching. So I hope that you enjoy this evening. You're going to get hopefully some different perspectives on some maybe questions that you're interested in. So do go ahead, write us your questions in the chat below. We definitely want to hear from you. If you're new, please remember to subscribe to our channel. While we don't do live streams very often in English, we do produce content, videos in German and in English. So please subscribe. Click below this video to subscribe and make sure to click the notification bell so that you will get a notification every time we put out new content. And as I said, we do content in English and in German. And if you enjoy this live stream and you would like to see this more often, then please write to us. Write a comment below this video, write in the chat, send us an email, whatever you want to do so that we know, yep, this is something that you are interested in, and this is something you'd like to, like to watch on a regular basis or whatever. So yeah, make sure you connect with us. You can get involved by subscribing to our YouTube channel. As I mentioned, you can also find us on Instagram, and you can find us on Facebook, where we put out daily content for you to encourage you and to help you, especially during this time of coronavirus. How's everyone doing? Hope you're doing well. Hope you're coping with the lockdown situation. So make sure to check us out on all of the social media platforms. We're looking forward to connecting with you. If you don't have social media, it's not a problem. You can email us, info@judenfürjesus.de. That's Jews for Jesus in German. And yes, we do also speak German and English and Hebrew. And we might throw in a bit of French tonight, as you'll see in a few moments. So welcome, and we hope that you enjoy the evening with us. So it is my pleasure to welcome a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, Joshua Turnil, coming to us live all the way from Paris. Welcome, Joshua.
Guten Abend, mein Liebe.
I wasn't expecting that, actually.
Bonsoir, mon frère.
That's much better. So, Josh, it's great to have you with us. Joshua Turnil is the leader of our Paris branch. You've had some exciting experiences just recently, but before we maybe get to talking about those, why don't you just introduce yourself to our viewers, Josh?
Well, my name is Joshua, as Aaron said. In French, I'm not called Joshua, I'm called Josue. The French have a hard time with the J and the sh. So my father-in-law calls me Josue. I was born in the Holy Land, the land promised to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in Queens, New York. Bit of pride in that.
It took me a while to get that, actually.
Okay.
I
It's
was
quite
like, I was like, I didn't realize that he was born in Israel, but yeah, okay. Should have known that. Should have known that, right?
So I grew up in the United States. That's where my parents still are, and I moved to France about 20 years ago. And 20, and maybe like 10 years ago, I became French. So my
Wow.
wife is from also from a Jewish believing background. and our kids were all born here.
Hmm.
And uh, so basically, most of my adult life has been in France, even though my formative years were in the States. I also lived in Israel for about a year, and that's where I picked up Hebrew, like
Hmm.
you did, Aaron, and that's been a source of great encouragement and enrichment for me personally, and also, yeah, of course, in ministry.
Yeah, you're actually a man of many languages, if I remember correctly. Because French, obviously, you speak fluently. English, Hebrew, but you also speak Spanish, correct?
I do. I speak Spanish, but of course, you, Aaron, speak many more languages than I do, and racking them up. Sometimes I wonder if you actually really do speak them, or you're just using like a phone app. And maybe you don't even speak German. You just when you talk to your wife, you just pull out your phone and
It's
you
just
talk.
Google Translate. That's all we use. Yeah, it's like those videos on YouTube, the language videos where people they can say like "I love you" in 25 languages, but that's all they can say. Yeah. No,
Well,
so why do you speak Spanish, Josh? What's because your background is not for our viewers. Just some of our viewers might not know, but there are different types of Jewish people. Now, if you're a viewer and you're saying yes, of course I know there are different types of Jewish people. There are Orthodox, there are secular Jews, there are Reformed Jews. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardi Jews. And I'm Ashkenazi, but Josh, you're a Sephardi Jew, correct?
yeah, yeah, and there's all kinds of different Sephardic Jews. So, what are Sephardic Jews? You'll know this, but I'll say this for the benefit of our viewers. In Hebrew, Sepharad actually literally means Spain.
Hmm.
Now, Sephardic Jews are those Jews that have come from the Levant, from the Mediterranean basin, the Balkans, the Netherlands, but originally they all have some connection to Spain. And today, most Sephardic Jews in France and maybe Israel, I think this is correct, are
Hmm.
from North Africa.
Hmm. Hmm.
Of course, there's a whole contingent of Iraqi Jews and Middle Eastern Jews, but the sort of the North African and Turkish Jews, which were Jews that fled Spain after the Inquisition
Hmm.
and were absorbed by the Turkish Ottoman Empire, developed a Sephardic culture around the expulsion from Spain. So there are a lot
Hmm.
of Spanish words in their language,
Hmm. Hmm.
Turkish words, there's Hebrew words, there's Arabic words. It's interesting. If you walk into, you'll know that you're in a Sephardic synagogue. I'm sorry, a Sephardic cemetery, is if you walk by in the headstones, many of them say Sultana.
Hmm.
Now, Sultana is like, it's an old name, but it's the name from my grandparents' generation. It's Jews who were indebted to the Sultan for having opened the borders, because when the Inquisition
Hmm.
came, the borders were opened by the Sultan. The Sultan thought that the King of Spain and the Queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella, were stupid to persecute their Jews. And he said, well, if you don't want them, I'll take them. And so
Wow.
he opened
Okay.
the borders, and many Jews, in gratitude for that, for generations, up until very recently, and some still are named their daughters Sultana in honor of the Sultan.
Really? That is fascinating. I've never heard that before. So thank you for that insight. Yeah. For our viewers, if you don't know the difference between Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardi Jews, it's definitely worth reading up on. It's very, very interesting. And especially in modern day Israel, there are big differences and there are big fights sometimes between Ashkenazi communities, Sephardi communities. So that's something maybe that you might be interested to look up. Uh, but Josh, I wanted to just right at the start ask you a bit about how you're doing in this COVID-19 situation. How has it hit you personally? How has it affected what Jews for Jesus are doing in Paris? How has it affected the Jewish community in Paris?
Well, early on, uh, I think it was March 17th was our lockdown date. And
Hmm.
from March 17th, things changed drastically. Because from March 17th, many of the cities in Paris were under curfew, which means you couldn't go out after dusk. Um, After March 17th, people were no longer allowed to be in pairs of two on the street.
Hmm.
They were only allowed to go out with a signed affidavit, and only for specific priority needs. Like you
Hmm.
and I were talking right before our time together about Amazon, who a lot of people depended on Amazon, but people have been spending so much time just ordering stuff on Amazon. The courts have ruled that Amazon's no longer to deliver any goods outside of those first needs, like
That's
the
incredible.
so right now we have 2 more weeks to go.
Hmm.
March 17th, the official date for the phasing out of the lockdown. So it won't be another. It won't be a night and day transition. It'll only be few people released at a time in specific regions, but that should start March 11th. So it's been an unusual time because the lockdown began shortly after Purim,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, gone through Passover,
Mm.
and it's coming on to Shavuot. So many Jewish communities for this has been an unusual and atypical year, as it's been not only for France but for many people all over.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very difficult time, and it's we have obviously talked off camera on this, and it's just mind blowing what people are going through. And we actually had a question that someone wrote in to us for this evening specifically, which I was going to actually talk about later on, but I think it's good to talk about it now. And the question is, and maybe this is something that you could speak to, maybe I can speak to a bit as well. I think it's something that's on everyone's mind is how can you cope with depression, especially during this COVID-19 time? Because, we're shut inside. For you in France, it's much worse than for us here in Berlin. I know that we have some viewers from the UK tonight. In the UK, it's also pretty bad at the moment. So, we're suffering in different ways. But how can we cope with depression at this time?
I think that's a great question, and it's a question that many people are dealing with. A lot of people are going to go through some emotional and psychological upheaval in their family relationships, especially if you're in lockdown and alone. Um, but let me just say there are a lot of good things happening in the world
Mm.
because of COVID-19. My niece Yael is stationed is an Israeli, and she was stationed to be at the border
Hmm.
for this whole month. But because hostilities have basically died down, she was called back home and has been
That's
at home.
incredible. That's incredible.
France has recalled all of its soldiers from the Iraq-Syria conflict.
Hmm.
They're all back home. I don't know what the ecological situation is, but here in France, seismologists have been those who measure tectonic plates and vibrations say that the tectonic plates around the Ile-de-France, which is the Paris and its environs,
Hmm.
has diminished by 40%.
Oh,
In other
wow.
words, no, there were vibrations in the Paris region due only to trains, planes, and automobiles.
Hmm.
And it's like been reduced by 40%. If anybody sees satellite images of Venice before COVID-19 and after COVID-19, but to that viewer in particular, I'd like to say, I support a mission work in Madagascar.
Hmm.
And in Madagascar, COVID-19 is probably the worst thing that could happen. They've run out of water.
Hmm.
Uh, there's corruption, so people are selling water. So we have running water.
Of
We
course.
I mean, they because of COVID-19, they stopped vaccinating, and people die there
Hmm.
from the lack of inoculations.
Hmm.
About 60,000 people a year just from the lack of inoculations. So the COVID-19's come to ingratiate an already difficult health situation. So, and I don't know what the weather's like where you're living, the person who wrote that in, but here in Paris, it's usually gray and cold and often gray. A lot of that's due to pollution. But since the lockdown happened here in Paris, it's rained 3 times and for less than half an hour.
That's just
And it's
incredible, isn't it?
sunny and clear skied. Pollution's down all over the planet. There are some good things now. This whole platform that we're able to communicate on, and that global communities will come out. And once the lockdown's over, we will have all of us, me included, will have so much joy in relationships
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
we've taken for granted, you
Yeah.
know. So there are some good things. Now, I would say, I'd say, try and lift your head above the fog, above the
Hmm.
clouds of depression, and dwell on good things. Some things that I do actually for me and my children. I print out an inspiring quote or a verse. It can be a verse from the Bible, or it can be a quote that is inspiring to you. And I print it and I just hang it on my wall. And
Hmm.
I did that for all my kids, and I do that regularly just to get our minds out of. I'd say watch the news a little less.
Hmm.
If anything major happens, you'll know about
Yeah.
it. Disconnect from the screens as much as possible, and just I did not. I'm usually quite a bit of a media hound, but I've made it. I've been through some difficult situations. We've been in France through some terrorist attacks. I was in
Hmm.
New York during 9/11. I was in Israel during a few of the wars there,
Hmm.
and I think that when tough times happen, we tend to become news hungry,
Hmm.
starved by news.
Hmm.
But that is not a healthy thing because news want to sell. And in
Hmm.
order for them to sell, what sells isn't the good things that are happening, it's the bad things that are happening because they know it keeps you hooked.
Yeah.
But that is an unhealthy situation. So I would say take down your news intake, go 24 hours without the news, you'll see the world is not going to fall apart.
Mm.
And try and focus your mind on other things.
Mm. Yeah, I think those are super wise words, especially about limiting the media intake, which is kind of ironic because we are we're talking now and we're on media, right? But it's definitely true, and I like the way you put it. If something important is happening that you need to know about, you will know about it because people will tell you, and you will be in touch with people. The only thing that I would add is just to really spend time with God. And if you have that personal relationship with Him, then to enter into this time and to really invest that time. And if you don't have this personal relationship with Him, then now is a perfect time to discover it. If you've never opened yourself up to the possibility that God might actually care about you and want a personal relationship with you, now is definitely the time to do that. And if you have questions about that, then please do get in touch with us. Write to us in the chat. Send us an email. We can even forward your questions onto Joshua in France if you would like to be in touch with him. If there's any way that we can help you,
Actually,
Josh. Yeah, go
don't write
ahead.
Don't write me. I'm super busy. I don't want to get confuse you people. No, I'm sorry. I'm joking. Actually, I do want to say something about prayer,
Yeah,
Aaron.
go for it. Go for it.
That is the right word for our time. I'd like to say that there are two words that do not go together well. For those of you who are new to prayer or kind of like outside of the religious circle, whether you be Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, or just an atheist, I'd like to say two words should never do not mix. They're piety and prayer.
Mm,
Piety and prayer do not go together.
mm,
Some of the most inspiring and relieving prayers are found in the Psalms. And in the Psalms, you can find things like "Cursed be the day I was born." You can find in the Psalms what they call imprecatory Psalms, where they say, "Blessed are those who dash your children's head against the rocks because of what you did to my children." So I think that prayer is that place where we can really evacuate those feelings of depression, those feelings of anger, those feelings of
mhm,
frustration. God
mhm,
doesn't want us to clean our act up and then come to Him with some pieties and some, good moral feelings. No, that's not what He's interested in at all. He's
mhm,
interested in the real you. He's
mhm,
interested in how frustrating life is and how disappointing life is. And I think a lot of people have been disappointed in this year. I mean, I had so many plans for the first few months of
mhm,
2020, all gone down the drain. But it reminds me of that famous Yiddish proverb that says, what is it? Man drives the herd, but God holds the reins.
mhm,
I
mhm.
don't know. Maybe you should translate that into German. I don't know. It might be a bit hard for a second language speaker, but yeah, I think that God is in control, and I think He's using these things to bring a lot of health
Mhm.
to us as individuals. We just have to find it and latch onto them and
Yeah.
just give that angst, that anguish, the phobias that come up for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
know. I know a different version of that proverb. It says, "Man plans and God laughs," but I
That's
like
also
I like
yeah.
your one better.
That's
It's really interesting what you were talking about before we started to talk about prayer. In answer to your question about looking for the good in life, and about what you were saying about the different things that are being affected because humans aren't flying, they're not driving. And we talked about it a couple of weeks ago in a German live stream, and the question was something along the lines of, do you think God is enforcing a Sabbath on the world because the world hasn't been keeping the Sabbath? Now, uh, obviously there are lots of people right now who are working much harder than they've ever worked before. So I don't know if you can necessarily draw that conclusion, but it does lead me onto a subject that I wanted to ask you about. Because here in Germany, and especially in Berlin, we are nuts about climate change. And I don't know if you heard about it in France, but uh, here there have been demonstrations where it's called Fridays for Future, and it's been a big thing where students have not gone to school on Fridays. They've gone and demonstrated, and of course, Greta Thunberg is idolized very much here in Berlin. Berlin is a very, very trendy city in that respect. So, what is your personal take on climate change? I mean, you spoke a bit about it, but why don't you go
Well,
into detail a bit more?
I think that, well, politically speaking, people are going green everywhere,
Mm,
and it's a European phenomenon. It's interesting because those are the two trends we've seen in the European Parliament, isn't it? Either there's two trends. There's a trend to the ecological parties, and there's the trend to the far right wing parties. Those
mm,
are kind
mm-hmm,
of trends we're seeing in Europe, and we're seeing that also in France. Um, I think that one thing that is just obvious, and it's something that we already mentioned, there's been a direct correlation between what man has been doing, what humanity's been doing for the last 6 weeks, the lockdown, the
mm,
planetary lockdown. It's been obviously a change in climate. So obviously, man's actions or humanity's actions, our actions, your actions, my actions,
mm,
have done something positive to affect the planet.
mm-hmm,
So there is a lot of disbelief about what actually happens with, what is the role of climate change? What is our role in climate
mm,
change? But I think it's safe and responsible to assume that just as our latest actions over the last few weeks has drastically impacted the planet for good, not just ecologically speaking, but also in terms of conflicts.
yes,
Um,
yeah,
we can say that it's it's just logical to assume that we also have a negative impact
mm,
on climate and politics. So I think that the question has to be is who's responsible? So is it just the oil companies, or is it
mm,
just the multinationals, or is it you and me? I think the mandate when God created Adam and Eve in the garden was clear:
mm,
enjoy,
mm-hmm,
enjoy life, enjoy nature,
mm-hmm,
take what you need, or take more than what you need. Have an
mm-hmm,
abundant life. An abundance of life is the clear mandate in scripture. God wants us to be fruitful,
mm-hmm,
multiply. He doesn't want us to just multiply. He wants us to enjoy the sweet things of life. And that's definitely been repeated even with the Jewish people coming into the land of Canaan or Canaan, the promised land, and there was just a bountiful harvest. And
mm,
the festivals, the Jewish festivals, are about us enjoying God's land. But at the same time, there is something about respecting God's land. Now, there's a famous biblical scholar called Mary McDonald. Yeah, Mary McDonald. That's right. Do you know her, Aaron? Mary McDonald.
I don't know her, so I'm interested. I'm looking forward to
Yeah,
what you're going
she
to tell me.
not Jewish, not a believer, but fascinated by the biblical text and a very
Mm-hmm,
serious biblical scholar. And she spent a lot of time with rabbis in Israel trying to get deep into what the Hebrew of the Torah is. And she concluded that a lot of the Torah laws were about respecting the land,
mm,
respect
mm-hmm,
animals. The COVID-19 came according to the best and knowledge that we have, the best Chinese scientists say someone ate something stupid.
mm-hmm,
Someone ate something they shouldn't have.
mm-hmm.
And if Mary McDonald, if Mary, is it Douglas or McDonald? I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of a senior moment. If what she's saying is right, is the Torah is also not there just to say, okay, I'm a religious person, so I'm just going to follow this to the letter. No, the Torah
Mm-hmm.
is saying we have to have some respect for the you don't bite the hand that feeds you. The
Mm,
planet
mhm,
feeds us, and we have to respect the ecosystem. We have to
mm,
respect the chain. And so someone ate something that they shouldn't have, and that
mm,
destroyed the world. And COVID-19, the Rabbi Teitelbaum, one of the most eminent Hasidic Haredi rabbis in the world, that died of COVID-19.
mhm, mhm,
Boris Johnson got it, the prime minister. High and low, no one is spared from COVID-19. And it
mhm,
reminds me of the passage that Paul talks about when he says, as through one man sin entered into the world,
mm, mhm,
through one man sin will be dealt with finally, decisively. Of course, that one man is Jesus. Of course,
mm,
Paul's using play on words: Adam, the man, and Ben Adam, the
mm,
title that actually Jesus uses for himself. Uh, so yes, I do think there is something to it, but more than entering into the political discourse, I'd like to say and me included, um, I'm responsible.
Mm,
I have
mm,
done my part, and I realize because I haven't been driving, because I haven't been taking the train, I've diminished the vibrations between the tectonic plates in Paris. It's so crazy. I didn't even know that was
yeah,
possible.
yeah,
It's
that is
actually what's
nuts.
happened.
Yeah.
You can just look at the statistics before
Hmm.
and after.
Yeah, that is crazy. It's uh, it's just such a big topic, and it's such a polarizing topic. I remember once I asked a pastor who's a good friend of mine, a German pastor, and I said to him, "What do you think is one of the main blind spots of the church?" And he said ecology. And I think that's really true. And I think it's a real big shame because everything that you've said is stuff that we read about in the Bible. And as believers in Yeshua, if we're Jewish, if we're not Jewish, we claim to believe that the Bible is the Word of God. And that includes the commands of the Torah, that includes everything that you've just mentioned. So climate change is it is something that affects us all, and it is something that we're responsible for that all of us are responsible for.
I can understand the hesitation of many people because I don't want to, how do you say, fall for the media
Mm,
ring circus.
yeah.
It's such a hot topic, and it's very political and it's very self-serving. But the reality is that God expelled the Jewish people from a
Mm,
biblical point of view from the
mm-hmm,
land of Israel because they
mm-hmm,
weren't respecting the Sabbath,
mm-hmm,
which meant, and the Shemitah in particular, sort of
mm,
the Shemitah, which is the Sabbath year.
mm-hmm.
So they didn't respect the Sabbath year, and the Sabbath year was you don't till the ground,
Yeah.
you know, and you just leave it alone. You can't just continually suck the juice out of something
Yeah.
and expect it will be okay. God said, just leave the land alone every seventh year, let it rest, and it's okay. You'll have a little less. What's the big deal? But
Mm,
the Jewish people couldn't do that, and so according to the biblical prophets, they said we were exiled from Israel because God wanted to protect the land from us. It
mm,
was a promised land. It was a treasured land. Everybody calls it the Holy Land,
mm,
but God spelled us in order to give the land the rest that He had conceived it to have, in order for it to be a land that we can depend upon and be
mm,
fruitful.
mm-hmm. I'm actually going to give you a rest just now, Josh. In that, I would like to talk a bit about. I'd like to go in a different direction now. I'd like to talk about your musical talents because you're actually a very talented individual, not just with languages, not just with speaking. Not just an eloquent person, as our viewers can tell, but you're also very musical.
I
And
know. I admire myself so much. I'm like, every time I wake up, like, Josh, you're such a lucky guy.
I see you've been working on your humility as well. I mean, it's commendable right there.
I wish my wife agreed with me. That's the only thing. Maybe we should show her this show so she can see how great I am.
Exactly right. At church, I was speaking at a congregation once, and they asked me to introduce myself in three words. So I said, beautiful, intelligent, and humble. And everyone started laughing. And to this day, I don't know why, you know. So Anyway, now I've thrown you all of these roses. Let's talk about your musical talents. You've actually produced two albums in your time in France, which is commendable. I think that's amazing. And your last album, Shoresh, which means roots or root, came out relatively recently. And we're actually going to play a clip. I hope it works with the technology, but we're going to play a clip in a few seconds from one of these from one of the songs from the album. Before we get to the clip, tell us just very briefly, and then I want you to rest. I want you to rest and enjoy this music, or at least will enjoy it. I'm not sure that you'll be able to hear it because of the technology, but tell us what was the project Shoresh? Why did you do it? Where did it come from?
Well, I feel like there's a sort of an undervalued brand of music within the messianic music world, and that is the music that Stuart Dowerman and some of the very early Jewish believers in Jesus wrote.
Hmm.
Stuart Dowerman studied at the Manhattan School of Music, which was at the time almost on par with Juilliard School of Music.
Hmm.
He had grown up in the synagogue. Moshe Rosen had told him, "Look, you should really bring us back to the music of our people," and that's what he
Hmm.
did in some very early songs. Now it's hard to get some of those recordings because they were on LPs, on the
Hmm.
record.
Yeah, the old records. Yeah.
Dug back into some old stuff, and I thought to myself, this music is solid enough, deep enough to be redone,
Hmm.
you know, with with great talent. So I got some, you're throwing me some roses, but really I was privileged to work with people that I was
Hmm.
able to work with on the album, true professionals, classical musicians, and also klezmer klezmer experts. Klezmer is the music of the European Jews of the
Hmm.
East, the Ashkenazi Jews, the difference we were talking about back then. But I am Sephardic, so I wanted to bring in some of those more Middle Eastern tunes, that same music. And what's interesting is that Stuart Dauerman is an Ashkenazi Jew,
Hmm.
and so I think in the song you told me you were going to play, it is a song written by an Ashkenazi Jew, but with a Sephardic or a Middle Eastern flavor. So it shows how many layers this kind of music has, and of course they're all based on universal texts, some very
Hmm.
beautiful poetic texts from the Psalms, from the Proverbs, from the prophets, and from the New Testament. And so what it turned out is that came out was a very refreshingly
Hmm.
new or modern album. And that I hope is timeless over time. In any case, his music, or the music of those early Jews for Jesus, was timeless music. Now, today everybody knows about the messianic music scene, and it's kind of become sort of the sort it's either the heimische, or the sort of the
Yeah.
stereotypical,
Yeah.
oompa oompa oompa,
Yeah.
and this is not that. We're really looking for something that could express some of the root of our Jewish identity, and that's why we chose the word shoresh, which means
Mm.
roots. But also, in that famous passage in Isaiah chapter 53, the Messiah is called a shoresh, a
Hmm.
root out of a
Hmm.
dry ground. And that in Isaiah uses the word shoresh.
Mm.
So we use that kind of a double entendre, as they like to say in America,
Yeah.
double entendre. So anyway, does that answer your question?
Yes, that's wonderful. Let's take a listen to this track. It's called "Blessed Be the Lord." So we'll just listen to.
ברוך אדוני כל יום ונאמן כי אדוני ישועתנו ברוך וברוך שמו ברוך אדוני כל יום ונאמן כי אדוני ישועתנו מלך הכבוד. Our God is a God of salvation, so bless his holy name. To God the Lord belongs escape from death. Bless his holy name. Notre Dieu est un Dieu de salut. Béni soit son saint nom. Dieu est pour nous le Dieu de délivrance. Béni soit son saint nom.
Wonderful. I love that clip because you show off just so many different things. You've got the three languages there. You've got some Hebrew, some English, and some French. And then you've got this wonderful klezmer music, as you said, European Jewish music, but with such a Mizrahi, such a Middle Eastern twang to it. So this is why I chose this album, or this track from the album. And the album is available for purchase. If anyone is watching this evening and would like to purchase a copy of Shoresh, it contains songs in French, in Hebrew, and in English. Unfortunately, nothing in German yet. That's maybe for Shoresh 2, or whatever your next album is going to be called, Josh. But if you would
That's for
like, if you would
that's for you.
like a, that's for me to do, right? If you would like a copy of Shoresh, if you'd like to purchase a copy, then just get in touch with us. You can email us at info@judenfürjesus.de, or you can send us a direct message, private message on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, whatever your personal preference is. Get in touch with us. And we've got a whole bunch of different things that you can buy in terms of books, DVDs. Josh has also produced a DVD, which is the story of a Holocaust survivor who came to faith in Yeshua as Messiah. That's also worth watching. Fascinating story. So please, if you're interested, there will be some links below. You can also visit our website. You can visit our French website if you're a French speaker. You can visit our American or British website. And there's a wide variety of different items for you to enjoy. And we hope that it'll be a blessing to you. So make sure you go and check those out. But Josh, thank you for letting me share Shoresh with our viewers tonight.
Thank you for sharing it. I love that song. It was kind of fun to record, as you can tell.
Yeah, I can believe it. So, I think the question that probably is on the minds of everyone who's watching this evening, who might not know you personally, that might not know what life is like in Paris for a Jewish person. What is the Jewish community like in Paris? Is it Ashkenazi? Is it Sephardi? Is it religious? Is it secular? Are they open to the idea of believing in Jesus? Are they closed?
Well,
Um,
that's a very great question. I'd say that the first thing that distinguishes the Jewish community in France, it's a very, very old community.
mm,
Uh, History shows that some of the first Jewish settlements came up with the Roman Empire, up the Rhone and the Saône to Marseille, and even up to the Bordeaux region. And over time, those settlements grew into the northern parts of France. So you have still today now, now, Aaron, you know Francois Blum, our good friend, and he's French, and Jewish, but his family's been in France since before the French Revolution.
hmm
So,
So a
it's
long
interesting.
time.
Many Jewish people, whether they're Americans or Israelis or even British, they're usually the seedbed of immigration and followed waves of migration. But in France, you still have French Jewish people that are more French than many of the French themselves. Now, today, though, and so I'd say that that older Jewish community is an Ashkenazi Jewish community. It's a
hmm
community that is kind of has its origins right around the Rhine Valley, right on
mm,
that frontier between France and Germany. Uh, but today, 70 to 80% of the population in France is Sephardic. And that comes from two reasons. One reason is that the Ashkenazi population was decimated. Three-fourths of the
hmm
Ashkenazi population was decimated during the war.
hmm hmm
Um, and then the second thing that contributed to the majority of Sephardic people is the Algerian War and the French colonial colonies kind of breaking apart.
mm,
And so that caused massive waves of immigration from North Africa to Israel and to France.
hmm
So today, most of the population in France is Sephardic of North African ascent, which has its own culture and traditions, which is very different than that of its Ashkenazi, of their Ashkenazi brethren.
That's very interesting. I was not aware of that. That's I just assumed that France was like most of the rest of the countries in Europe. Very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting, especially when it comes to Sephardic Jewish uh, relationships.
hmm
So
hmm
yeah, we could go off and talk about that for a while, but I don't know if our viewers would need to know on that.
Well, I think what would interest me and what would also interest our viewers is what is the situation like in terms of religiosity? Because France is a very, for me as an outsider, aggressively secular country. Um, Maybe you would like to speak about the French concept of laïcité
You
and how that impacts the Jewish community.
you are right. Yeah, the French secular civilization is a unique brand of secularism
Mm,
in Europe, I think. So you have a phenomenon here
mm,
uh, of Orthodox Jewish atheists or traditional Jewish atheists. There's a famous joke, uh, where the rabbi goes to Jacques and says, "Jacques, do you believe in God?" And Jacques says to the rabbi, it doesn't answer the rabbi.
mm,
And he catches up to him later in the day and says, "Jacques, do you believe in God?" And Jacques doesn't answer the rabbi.
mhm,
Later in the week, they meet at the supermarket. They're shopping for some
mhm.
reason, bump into each other. And then Jacques' like, "Oh, Rabbi, how are you doing? Good to see you." And he's like, "Oh, good to see you too, Jacques. The other day I asked you a question. You didn't answer me." "Oh, sorry, what question was it?" He said, "Jacques, do you believe in God?" And Jacques said, "No, Rabbi, I'm sorry. I don't believe in God." "Well, Jacques, why didn't you answer me the other day?" And Jacques said to the rabbi, "But Rabbi, it was Shabbos. I couldn't answer you." So I
Okay.
mean, it's kind of an inside joke. I'm sure a lot of people are saying, "What
That
does
doesn't
that mean?"
make any sense. It doesn't make any
Just that
sense.
there is a sense that there's a high and holy atheistic tradition
hmm
among Jews and non-Jews in France,
hmm
and Jewish practice, Jewish identity does not necessarily revolve around belief, but
hmm
that's actually something that's probably true of Jews in Germany,
Yeah.
Jews in America, Jews in Israel. Judaism is religion of deed, not
Mm.
creed. They say. Tradition teaches us how to live our lives, not what to believe.
So you would say that the Jews of Paris are mostly very traditional, very proud to be Jewish, and might keep traditions like turning their phone off on Shabbat on the Sabbath, but they don't actually necessarily believe in God per se. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, I think, of course, it's hard to generalize for anything,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to Jewish people.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
but I would say that the recent surveys leave people pondering what it means. So I think some of the most accurate surveys were done about I don't know 20 years ago. And the reason I say that is because there are laws in France concerning keeping lists based on religion and creed,
Hmm.
or religious identity. So it's very hard for demographers to get straight answers today, or to be able to locate the communities they're trying to survey. 5% of the Jewish community was considered Orthodox,
Hmm.
and yet 50% of the community was considered traditional,
Hmm. Hmm.
or self-identified.
Hmm.
I think the
Hmm.
question is self-identification. They self-identify 5% identified as Orthodox Jews. Half of the French Jewish community identified as atheists.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, a recent, not a religious survey, but a demographical survey has shown that really religious observance among Jews in France has increased.
Hmm.
And secular demographers that are scientists say this flies in the face of all social theory,
Hmm.
and social theories about people becoming more and more secular, less and less religious, less and less spiritual,
Hmm.
as society becomes more scientific, more
Hmm.
rational,
Hmm.
technological events. Well, the opposite is happening among the Jewish people in France. They're becoming more religious.
Hmm.
Now, does that mean they believe in God or no? Does that mean that they're spiritual? Does that mean they're superstitious? It's hard to tell.
Hmm.
But I think that's where it's at. Yeah, the French Jewish horizon thinking, political views, mindset is a very interesting mindset, and
Hmm.
very interesting uh, to follow.
Yeah, thank you for that description. We are going to just have a look at our chat because we've got some comments coming in and I wanted you to be able to hear them. So we have Andre Berg, if I've pronounced it correctly, who knows you from Belgium. So he sends greetings to you. We know Joshua Turnil from one of his visits in Belgium. So he's precious for the
Bonjour,
Lord.
bonjour, merci d'être là avec nous.
And then we have a question here, and that's from Sarah. Sarah is one of our faithful viewers. So hi, Sarah. Glad you could be with us this evening. Well, our evening. And the question is the French makeup, Jewish makeup, I guess, due to the French colonialism? It makes sense from that perspective. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like I said, the majority of there's been a shift recently from a majority of Ashkenazi
Mm.
Jewish community to a Sephardic Jewish community,
Hmm.
and that speaks directly to the impact of the war on the Jewish community in France, and the immigration from former colonies, and the independence of the Algerian state,
Hmm.
because Algeria was formerly considered a French department, a département, a French state,
Hmm.
a part of the
Hmm.
French state. And so
Hmm.
everyone who was born in Algeria was French. They weren't Algerian.
Hmm.
But with the Algerian War of Independence, that ended, and so a massive amount of Algerian Jews immigrated to France. So most of the Sephardic Jews, even though there are Tunisian Jews in France, there are Moroccan Jews in France, there are Egyptian Jews in France,
Hmm.
the vast majority of Jewish people in France are Algeria,
Hmm.
who came here sort of kind of like over a weekend or a couple of weeks, kind of had to pack their bags last minute,
Hmm.
left
Hmm.
all their belongings, their homes. Sometimes companies were nationalized, and they had to sort of run for their lives to come back to
Wow.
France.
Wow. Okay.
So yes, Sarah, you're right. You're right on. That's exactly right.
So, as we're talking about the makeup of the French Jewish community, particularly the Parisian Jewish community, I'm interested in your role because I know that you attend synagogue, and sometimes I think for Christians especially, it's difficult to understand why, if you're a Jewish believer in Jesus, why would you go to synagogue? Um, so, what would you say to someone who's struggling as a Christian to understand why you might go to a synagogue on a regular basis?
Well, That's a really good question. I know that it is difficult to understand. There are many answers to that, many levels. One is just having a Jewish family means that you end up going to a synagogue anyway. You
Mm-hmm.
either go for a
Mm-hmm.
wedding, or you go for a circumcision, or you go because it's the high holidays and it's a family event. So, among those, so there's a high level of religious observance in France among Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons for that is not because of personal faith or conviction. A lot of it is because people's grandparents are still alive.
Mm.
And so everyone gathers around the matriarch or the patriarch,
Mm-hmm.
and they all have dinner at his house on Friday night, and then they go the next day to shul. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like a more practical, family oriented, or community based relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the answer. A second part of the answer is that my relationship with the Jewish community has changed somewhat.
Mm.
A relationship that was typically or traditionally antagonistic. Aaron, as well as I do, that the word missionary, and that is really what I am. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
missionary, and you're a missionary. We are sent to bring good news to the Jewish people, and the
Mm-hmm.
Jewish people that do not know the good news, and so it is not well perceived. I'd say it's ill perceived, or it's
Mm-hmm.
been traditionally ill perceived. And so the relationship between uh, me, my Joshua Turnil, or Jews for Jesus in general, has
Mm-hmm.
been an antagonistic one over that issue of who Jesus is. Is
Yeah.
Jesus the Messiah or not? And that's changed recently, and a lot of that's due to, of course, I believe in God's divine providence, and I believe that God is changing substantially our relationship with the Jewish community in
Mm-hmm.
France, but also in Jews for Jesus around the world, as God's opening the hearts of Jewish people to the Lord. So that's something to rejoice over. But secondly, I think another thing that plays big into the role is anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
France anti-Semitic climate is huge, pervasive, and I get unfortunate reminders of that. Either me personally as a Jewish person or as a
Mm-hmm.
Jews for Jesus office.
Mm-hmm.
We get bullets in the mail. We get hate mail. We get nasty pictures sent to
Did you
us.
say you get bullets in the mail?
We've gotten bullets in the
Wow.
mail. We've gotten all kinds of sort of, the clippings where someone clips out all the letters and pastes them on with
Mm-hmm.
a threat. We've gotten really bad Facebook messages from people who show their faces, explain their threat, say what they're going to do, and then show us what they're going to do. So it's pretty nasty. So anti-Semitism has caused the Jewish community to sort of say, you know, we're all Jews together in a hostile climate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's opened the doors. So I guess uh, for me, in my own personal ethic, I would not have gone to the synagogue regularly outside of family obligations or outside of special occasions, special events,
Mm-hmm.
unless I felt like my presence there was not considered, how do you say, undesirable or a threat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, to have a Jews for Jews missionary go to a synagogue, it's kind of like saying if you were a Baptist minister, a Catholic minister, and Jehovah's Witnesses come to your church not because they're interested in Catholicism or the Baptist or the Evangelical Church, they're interested in making people Jehovah's Witnesses. That would be kind of the way I'd say we were perceived a few years ago. But since that perception has changed, I've been able to participate in synagogue services as a fully fledged Christian, Jewish believer in Jesus, Jews for Jesus missionary,
That's
and
incredible.
have been able to worship. And when I say worship, means I don't. I mean, I don't depend on a church to worship. I worship I'm in my office right now, so
Mm-hmm.
I read the Bible here and I pray and I worship the Lord
Mm-hmm.
here.
Mm-hmm.
So I can worship the Lord anywhere. But when I'm in the synagogue and I'm reading the Psalms along with my people, or when I read a prayer that says, Heavenly and Holy Father on high, have mercy upon us with the mighty, on the merit of the mighty acts of your salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And in Hebrew, it literally says, B'Yeshuatecha, your Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It makes it very easy for me to worship.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes me very easy for me to worship. So I'm very happy to be there. And I've actually had some open doors to actually speak and to actually lead some of the prayers and to read from the Torah scrolls. I have the Torah scroll here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the latest ones, and I think you wanted to talk to me about this, Aaron, was Tu B'Shvat. Do you want to go there now, or did you want to go there a little later?
No, we can definitely go there now. We're heading towards the end of our time together, but I would love for you to tell that story about Tu B'Shvat. For those of you who are watching and don't know what Tu B'Shvat is the Jewish New Year of the trees. There are four different Jewish New Years, and one is for the trees, where the trees are renewed. And so, to celebrate Tu B'Shvat, very often we as Jewish people will plant trees, do something like that, and you can see all these kinds of things happening all over the world. Berlin, Paris, of course, Israel. And Joshua, you had an incredible opportunity. So why don't you just tell us in a few sentences about Tu
Again,
B'Shvat?
it was kind of like one of these things that you can't really, as a minister, sometimes you just wake up and things happen. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily because of anything that you did in particular, it's because of what God's doing. Um, so to be Shvat, I was going to attend
Hmm.
just as a regular attendee because I developed relationships with the leadership of that community and with some of the people in that community. And so it turns out that the rabbi couldn't come because he was in Israel, stuck with his daughter,
Hmm.
and the chazan, who was supposed to lead the liturgy, had some issues with the moving company because he was exactly in the middle of moving houses,
Hmm.
and he literally could not get away to come to the service. So a little bit of a backdrop. I won't go into it. I'll just say, suffice it to say, I had already participated in leading services for this community last year for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur,
Hmm.
where I participated in relationship and in cooperation with the synagogue leadership. But this time, none of the main people who could do the prayers were there. So the president of the synagogue called me and said, Josh, I don't know what to do. We need to get a music team together. We need to figure out how to do this. Can you help me? Can your team come and
Hmm.
help me? So basically, my team came in and helped organize the whole event, and I led all the prayers. And my group, actually the group that helped do the Shorish album that we're listening to today,
Hmm.
did the music, and I spoke. I gave a message,
So
and
hang on a second.
I
Wait. Hold up. Just in case our viewers do not see the seriousness of this, or just how incredible this is. You, as a Jews for Jesus worker, were asked by the president of the synagogue to lead the prayers, the whole service for Tu B'Shvat, and to give a message. Is that correct?
yeah.
That's just incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and I actually quoted the Apostle Paul, who said that the the people of God are like a tree, an olive tree,
Mm, mm,
that
mhm,
the
mhm,
Gentiles through the Messiah would be grafted into that
mhm.
tree.
Beautiful.
And then after that, she thanked the presence of Messianic Jews afterwards. So at the end, since I was at the door saying goodbye to people, and people would say, "Oh, so how long have you been the rabbi here?" And I would systematically. I would say, "I'm not a rabbi. I'm a pastor."
Mhm, mhm.
And I mean, because in France, pastor is a similar word to minister, so I
Yes,
say, I'm
yeah,
a
yeah.
minister of the gospel, and je suis pasteur. And so that really, in that systematically led to very interesting conversations. And of course, I tell them about Jews for Jesus and why we're here and what we're doing.
Mhm,
So it really came to reinforce a more positive relationship, not an antagonistic one, but I'd say a protagonistic one,
mm,
where I don't have to be anybody else.
mm,
I don't have
mhm.
to act like a rabbi. I don't have to avoid the Christian etiquette, the sticker. I'm happy to be called a Christian. I'm happy
Mhm,
called a pastor, and
mhm.
they see that it's beyond those sort of categories, which is a difficult thing in France because in France is definitely a country of categories. It's
Yes,
not
yeah.
America where they're bleeding the edges of those kinds of identities, but
Mhm,
here you're a Jew, a Catholic, or a Muslim.
mhm,
That you
mhm,
know.
mhm.
So it was a blessing. It was great. It was a great experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a phenomenal experience, and we were obviously just we were amazed at that. We were rejoicing with you, and just yeah, I mean, if you're watching this as a viewer, please pray for Joshua and his team in France. It's not an easy situation to be in, as you've heard this evening, with anti-Semitism rising very strongly in Paris. So please pray for the team. Pray for Joshua, and pray for open doors for wonderful things like this, where we as Jewish believers in Jesus can show solidarity with our Jewish people, but also more than that, where we can actually share what we've discovered in Jesus, which is what Josh is doing. Josh, before we wrap things up or winding down, we got a couple of comments. I just wanted to say hi to the people who are joining us in the chat. So thank you so much, Annette, that you're here. Thank you, Vit Mangen. Thank you that you're here this evening. Thank you for the Jews for Jesus Paris branch, which are also joining us, watching Josh. So that's wonderful.
Bonjour,
And
les amis.
and there is one last question, again from Sarah. Uh, so maybe you could say a few sentences about this, Josh. And the question is, what, if any, ultra-Orthodox communities are active in Paris? Are there any ultra-Orthodox communities in Paris?
So I guess, Sarah, that would depend on what you mean by ultra orthodox. I mean, there's so many different brands of ultra orthodoxy. I would say that the majority of the traditional Jewish French community are under an umbrella organization called the Consistoire, and this Consistoire was established by Napoleon
Mm.
in the sort of with the same structural basis or the structural inspiration as was the Sanhedrin. And
Mm.
so there are 72 rabbis that lead the seminary and the Orthodox Union of all synagogues. There are splinter groups of that Orthodox group, but what has been growing more and more in France is a Hasidic group called the Chabad Lubavitch movement,
Mm.
and that is definitely an international movement. It's taking strength in many, many countries all over the world. What we have a lot less of, not to say that we don't have them, we do have them, but we have a lot less of the Haredi Hasidic movement here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, when I mean Haredi Hasidic, I'm talking about if you've ever read Chaim Potok, or if you've ever read Fiddler on the Roof, or if you've ever read any of those quintessential Sholem Aleichem, stories of Hasidics who live according to the sayings and teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. Though we do have a few of those movements, but a lot less, a lot
Mm-hmm.
less. Thank you.
Thank
It's a
you.
very important question. Very good question.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks for sharing about that. We just got a few minutes left, and I would like to take the opportunity to remind everyone, if you haven't done this already, please subscribe. We are doing live streams like this every Monday evening, answering your questions. So write to us. We would love to answer your questions. We do live streams in English probably around once a month, where I'm going to get a guest in each time, from all over Jews from Jesus, maybe outside of Jews for Jesus. We don't know. We're all new at this, right? So please subscribe, click the notification bell so you get a reminder, so you don't miss any of the content. And we upload content on a very regular basis. If you're new to our YouTube channel, click on the videos tab, go and have a look. There's loads of content in English and German. Visit the French Juif pour Jésus YouTube channel as well. Make sure you check out their content if you're a French speaker. And like I said, please remember to subscribe. You can also get involved with us in other ways. You can check out our other social media channels, not YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're active on a number of these different channels, so make sure to check us out. And if you would like to support the work that we're doing, if you like what you're hearing this evening and you're encouraged by it, and you would actually like to financially support the work that Joshua is doing in Paris, the work that we're doing in Berlin or all over the world, then you can do that very easily online. And there'll be a link hopefully to the side of me that you can see. There's also a link in the description if you'd like to give at the end of this video, if God puts that on your heart. And if you're watching this on a computer and you've got your phone, then we've even got a QR code for you, which will be up on the screen now, and you can scan that QR code and that will take you straight away to the donation page. So yeah, thank you in advance for your support. Obviously, the work that we're doing is based on donations from people such as yourself, and we're so grateful for that, especially at this time of COVID-19, where everyone is short, and it's a big sacrifice. So we thank you very much on behalf of Jews for Jesus for anything that you would be inclined to give. Josh, I'm going to come back to you. Just to say thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it. You're a busy man. I appreciate that you've given me an hour plus the setup time. It was great to have you with us this evening.
I feel so privileged to be with you and to share. It was fun. I really enjoyed it. We have to do this again sometime.
That would be great. Hey, maybe I can even come and do something on Juif pour Jésus, and then everyone can hear my really bad French.
I love that. That's a great idea. Absolutely. Let's do it.
So the sequel is on your channel then.
Yes, the sequel will be en français.
Great. So I am going to play us out with your tune again because it is so wonderful. And I am going to say to everyone in a second, Shalom Chaverim, and thank you so much for being with us. Don't forget to comment, to like, to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.